I'll move on to our next speaker, who is Dr Sarah Gillanders, and she will be doing an interactive wellbeing session. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Digby Brown, for inviting me along today, and well done, Anne-Marie, for organising today's event. It's been really interesting so far. I hope everyone else has taken as much from it as I have. So my name is Sarah Gillanders. I am a clinical neuropsychologist, so I specialise in working with people who have had brain injuries, spinal injuries, or who have been diagnosed with a neurological condition. And part of my work is to support people with their mental health and well-being. So today I'm going to be delivering an interactive wellbeing session, which will have a different feel to the sessions that we've had so far this morning, because I'm going to be asking you to become involved in a few exercises and try them out with me today and see how you find them. And if they're useful, you can go away, keep practicing them, look into them a little bit more. And if not, it's been an interesting morning, you've given something a try that maybe you haven't tried before. So when I have been preparing for the talk today, I was doing some research around the impact of coronavirus on mental health, and particularly around the impact of coronavirus on the mental health of people who have sustained brain injury. And one of the pieces of research that really stood out to me has come from Headway in the past 12 months. And they asked people with brain injury how the pandemic has affected their mental health. And what came from that research was that people were reporting an increase in their experiences of symptoms of anxiety, increased levels of depression, increased isolation, finding it more difficult to access rehabilitation, and feeling less hopeful for the future. Now, this was an extensive document and there are a lot more findings, but they were some of the key findings that they reported. But when I was preparing for today, I thought I don't want to put up slides with lots of data. And as much as today is focusing about people with brain injury, what I'm hoping is that the exercises that we do together today are going to be helpful for everybody, regardless of whether you've had a brain injury or not. Because I think it's quite timely that this event is taking place at the moment and that there is this focus on well-being. Because the last 14 months have been unlike any we've ever known, it's put a strain on everybody in one way or another. We've all had our unique experiences of what the pandemic has been like. But if you had a brain injury, there's a whole level of complexity there, of additional stress and strain that you've had to deal with, or if you're the friend or the relative of someone with a brain injury, additional strain and stress for you to deal with. And that's whether you had your brain injury a long time ago, and perhaps you'd found ways to look after your well-being. Perhaps you went to a bowling club once a week, perhaps you went to quiz nights, had coffee with friends. You had what we call coping mechanisms, strategies to look after your well-being. And what the pandemic has done is made it more difficult for you to use those coping strategies, and maybe your mental health has been affected accordingly. For those who sustained brain injury during the pandemic, you've had to adjust to life with a brain injury while services haven't been running as usual, and the challenge of the pandemic as well as the new brain injury. And first trying to work in rehabilitation services or legal services or any other background that people come from in listening to this event today, we've been trying to keep things going and it's been stressful too. So I guess today I recognise the importance of mental health and brain injury, but really I hope this is of value to all. So first of all, I would like to invite you to take part in a grounding exercise. Now, some of you may be familiar with meditation and relaxation exercises. It's very similar to that. And it's going to fit in nicely with the mindfulness that we can take part in at 1 o'clock today as well. So what I'm going to invite you to do, and I realise that some people listening may have physical disabilities that make this difficult to do, so adapt this into whatever way is comfortable for you. But what I'd like you to do is, if your legs are crossed at the moment, just to uncross your legs and to plant your feet flat on the floor, to sit in a position that's comfortable, And to rest your hands on your lap. If you're comfortable closing your eyes, please do so and just be guided by my voice. But if you'd rather keep your eyes open, please just fix your gaze on a point in front of you and let your eyes just settle there. Now what I'd like you to do is to begin to take some nice slow breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. In through your nose and out through your mouth. And just keep that rhythm going. And try to bring your focus onto your breath, noticing how it feels as the air enters through your nostrils. The feeling of your chest filling, your ribs expanding, your belly expanding. As you breathe out, perhaps how your ribs feel as they relax, your shoulders dropping, and how the air feels as it leaves your mouth. And if when you're doing this, you notice that your mind starts to wander onto something else, your mind's just doing what minds will do, and just invite your focus back to your breathing. And if your mind wanders 5 or 6 times, invite it back 5 or 6 times. And as you keep your breathing nice and slow, I'd like you to think for a moment about what it was that brought you along to this event today. Was there something about wanting to learn more about brain injury, the focus on well-being and nurturing ourselves? Although we're all on Zoom, is there something about connecting with others in a similar situation? And this interactive session now, what's made you join the event for this or stay on the event for this? Is there a part of you that recognizes that taking some time for yourself is important right now, is necessary right now, something you're curious about? Think about how you want to be during this session, how open you want to be with yourself, and what you want to get from it. And imagine that your out-breath is like blowing on those embers, letting them glow, letting you be really in touch with what matters to you at the moment, in this session today. And let that stay with you as we work through the other exercises and the mindfulness at lunch and the session beyond and your day beyond that. When you're ready, I'm going to invite you to start moving your fingers, your toes, maybe rolling your shoulders, having a little stretch. And when you feel ready, just begin to open your eyes and become aware of the room around you. And just focus yourself back on the screen again. And this is where I wish I was sat with each one of you individually, because I'd be asking you how you found that and what came up for you. So imagine me asking you those questions, being curious, caring, even though I can't do it to hear your answer one-to-one. So in addition to that grounding exercise, I'm going to introduce 3 techniques today that, like I say, you might find helpful or you might not. I work with people who have got anxiety, depression, PTSD, problems with adjustment, relationships difficulties, changes in self-identity. And what I think bridges the interventions I use with any of these conditions is a sense of general well-being and getting the foundations of well-being in place, and then the other more complex techniques that we might use together are more beneficial if you have this well-being in place. So I often focus a lot on this in addition to more CBT or acceptance and commitment therapy techniques. So this is going to go from quite a calm slide to a much brighter slide. I would like to introduce to you the idea of the capacity cup. Now, this illustration was drawn by Dr. Emma Hepburn, who is a clinical psychologist in Aberdeen. She is on Instagram and Facebook as the Psychology Mum, and if you don't follow her, I would recommend that you do, because she takes psychological evidence and techniques and approaches, and she uses illustrations to make it much easier to understand those concepts. And she's also produced a book called A Toolkit for Modern Life, and this has got a lot of her illustrations in, as well as a guide for how to use them for self-help. And I use these in sessions with my patients as well. So I'll introduce the idea of the capacity cup, and then I'm going to get us all to do an exercise using it. So the idea of the capacity cup is we all have a certain amount of emotional capacity. There is so much that we can deal with in life, and when that capacity has been filled, that cup will overflow. And that's where we might feel anxious, irritable, short-tempered, and exhausted. Now, Emma recently produced this diagram of coronavirus overwhelm. And I show it to you today because contained in that cup are lots of good examples of things that we might be finding overwhelming. Yes, these are focused on COVID, and I'm recognizing very much today that it's not just COVID that we're wrestling with, but there are lots of other issues going on in our lives as well. But this is helpful to illustrate just what we all might be dealing with. So what we've got here is news and information overload. I know that I personally have had to really limit the amount of exposure that I have to the news. There have been times where it's been really important for me to switch off, to watch the news once a day and to tune into important briefings. But other than that, it's been important to not feel overloaded by COVID-related news. For some people, boredom has been an issue because their routine has changed. They've lost jobs, they've lost their hobbies and their interests. Routine has changed dramatically. For some, there have been premature endings. Now, that could be ending of a job quickly. It could be the ending of a relationship, the loss of a loved one. For some people, there's isolation, and that's a real capacity cup filler. Isolation is so distressing, and yet for other people, they're struggling to have any time alone. We're constantly having to adjust to changes. We've never before lived in a time where our political leaders have had such control over our behavioural choices, from saying you must stay at home, to you may not hug people, to you can leave home, to you can hug people. And we've just had to be able to try and adjust and respond to these changes as we've been told what to do. Many of us have been missing family and friends because we've either lost them through the last 14 months or because we're just not able to see people in the same way that we were. The loss of coping mechanisms, which is what I was referring to before, about those strategies that you maybe previously had for looking after yourself and how they've been affected. Dealing with uncertainty about what's going to happen next. Although we're being told that the pandemic is easing and we can start doing more than we were able to do, that in itself brings up a lot of anxiety for people. Pandemic pressure to be productive, so whilst at times our energy levels have felt very low, there's been a sense of you should be looking after children and homeschooling to the best of your ability. You should be trying to adjust the way you work. You get these images of people making bread or banana loaves, and it can be a pressure to try and live up to these expectations. There's been a juggle for many people around balancing work, school and life, grief for the ones that we've lost, worry about family who are well but may become sick, or who are sick and isolated and we can't support as we like, changes in our support network, deteriorating mental health, experiencing greater stress and strain at work, attempting to homeschool, financial strain for many. But what's interesting here is right in the middle of this cup, this rather grumpy, cross-looking coronavirus. It says vigilance for higher levels of risk and threat. And our threat systems have been on high alert for over a year now. We've been told that at times it's dangerous to leave your house, it's dangerous to touch surfaces, it's dangerous to touch other people. This risk is all around you. You can't see it, but it's there. And so our threat levels have been heightened to keep ourselves safe. But with that comes cortisol, adrenaline, a real sense of danger. And even though we're being told it's not as dangerous now, this doesn't just turn off, which is why I think these wellbeing sessions now are so helpful, because how do we try and deal with getting back into the world and resuming activities that we were previously told were quite dangerous? So coming back to the capacity cup, I appreciate that some of the writing on this is small. And if it's too hard to see, if you're on a phone or an iPad, perhaps after the session today, you can go back and zoom into these slides and see in more detail what they say. But at the bottom of the cup, we've got the green stripe and it says, I've got all the space in the world. So this is when your capacity cup is not too full. And if something unexpected comes along, you have the capacity there to deal with that without it causing too much distress. In the purple zone there, you're juggling life, but you've got plenty of capacity left. So yes, things are busy, but if something was to come along, you feel able to deal with it. But when you start hitting the red zone, that's when you're getting to the point of being nearly full and at risk of spilling over. And that's where we might feel anxious, irritable, overwhelmed, exhausted, or just sense of overflowing. So to give an example, if someone in your home knocks over a bottle of milk and it spills and it makes a mess, if you're in that green zone, you might respond by, saying a cliche like, let's not cry over spilt milk, let's find a towel, let's get this cleaned up. Whereas if you're up in that red zone and someone knocks over a bottle of milk, you might go, oh my goodness, really? Why? I can't deal with this. I've got too much other things to deal with. And that same event of the milk being knocked over, at times you can feel very able to deal with because you have the capacity to do so. But if you don't have the capacity, you find yourself reacting in a way that you wouldn't have expected. And so by understanding what's in our capacity cup and just how full it is, allows us to know what can we do to try and reduce what's contained in there so we can feel calmer. And that's what these pink blobs here are telling us about. So this one here says, work out what's filling your cup. And that's what we're going to do in a moment. Of those things that are in there, can you throw some of them out? Try not to let more into your cup if possible. So if you're a yes person, perhaps you need to learn when it's beneficial to say no. What remains in the cup? How can you problem solve how to tackle that stuff? Focus on what is in your control. So what can you change? What can't you change? The stuff you can't change, let go. The stuff you can change, take small steps to change. Talk things through with other people. Find ways to relax and take time out. So what I'd like you to do now is to get a sheet of paper. Like Chris said at the beginning of the talk today, if you have a sheet of paper and a pencil, you might choose to draw a cup on your piece of paper, or you might choose just to write a list. But what I'd like you to do is to begin to think about what's inside your capacity cup, what's taking up emotional energy for you. Now, some of these things might be mundane, everyday things. It might be that you have young children at home, that takes up energy. It might be that work is very stressful at the moment, or boredom is a particular issue for you. Now, all of these things change over time. There'll be times when work is busy and times when work is not. So these are not fixed. But think about what's in your cup. And if you can, and you are using the diagram, give these different things space. So what do you feel is filling your cup at the moment? And then it'll be interesting to look at it and just see how full is my cup and which are the main things here that are filling it up. So I've put both slides up here because if you felt like some of the issues that were on the coronavirus cup there resonated with you, then use those as examples. but see if you can think of the things that are taking up your emotional energy at the moment. And I'll be quiet for a moment while you have a go at doing this exercise, and then I'll speak again in a minute. Okay, and I'll ask you to pause there. I know that was very brief, and if it's something you think would be helpful to build upon, then please do take the time after the session today to do so. I realise today is very much just an introductory session. But coming back to this diagram here, you've begun to start working out what's filling up your cup. Now, if you take a look at that cup that you've drawn, or the list that you've written, can you now think of anything that's in there that you can throw out? And put stars next to those things that you feel you're doing that are taking up valuable energy and emotional resources that actually you just looking at them go, I don't need to be focusing on this. I'm worrying about the wrong things here. This isn't helpful. This isn't beneficial. Those are things that I can drop and actually reduce that capacity level and start feeling calmer and managing my stress better. Moving up here, this is about you noticing if you are a yes person, and if you do reduce what's in your capacity cup, not then going and filling it up again. Think about what remains in your cup after you've thrown some things away, and how can you problem solve what's in there. So if, for example, you're worrying about your health and not feeling as fit as you'd like to, how can you build more exercise into your day? If it's poorly controlled pain, is there anything else that you can be doing to manage your pain? Problem solve what's there. Focus on what's in your control. So what's in that cup can you do something about? And think about the small steps that you can take to manage them. And again, with what's in there, try and find someone to talk things through with. Find ways to relax, to bring that stress level down, and take time out. Take a break from the worry, from the stress, and focus on other things. Now, the second exercise I'd like to introduce you to, again, I wish I could speak to you about what is in each of your cups and how you found doing that, and whether you found it quite helpful to take that time to sort of reflect inward on what you're dealing with at the moment. I'd love to know what came up for you there and what you're taking from this in terms of how much you're taking on at the moment, what's stressing you out, and how you might deal with that. But one of the things I really focus on in therapy with people is around noticing, naming, and nurturing. And that's about noticing how you're feeling at any point in time, being able to name those feelings, and then responding in a nurturing way to it. So at any point in time, we've listed 6 feelings here, but there are many, many more. And if I asked you to rate yourself on these 6 feelings at the moment, we would all be somewhere on them. And the important thing to know is that our feelings vary throughout the day. They get triggered by different events. At times you feel quite positive, at other times less so. But it's important to keep checking in little and often. And if what you notice is actually that you feel really quite positive, what does that tell you? What is it that you're doing at this point in time that's helping you to feel this way? Because then if you're not feeling so great in the future, you can go back to thinking, but I know I feel good when I'm doing this, and try and build those things back into your life. If when you reflect on how you're feeling, what actually comes up for you is that you're irritable, frustrated, angry, upset, think about why. What's driving those feelings at the moment, and what steps can you take to try and deal with them? So again, just briefly, if you're comfortable doing so, I would just invite you to close your eyes, take a breath, and just notice how you're feeling at the moment. You can use these 6 examples if you wish, but just get in touch with how you're feeling at the moment. There's a huge benefit just bringing you back to therapeutic writing. And it's one thing to reflect quietly on these feelings, but it's very powerful to write them down. I am upset, or I feel calm. However you happen to be feeling, it can be so beneficial to write, I feel this way, and elaborate. I feel calm because I feel safe in my home. This is helping me. I feel agitated because this is outside of my comfort zone, or I know that later on today I have to do something I don't want to do. So if you can write these things down, start making those connections, it can be really helpful. Again, if I was sat with you, I would have asked you what came up for you, so sorry I can't do that. Now here, another very bright slide, but this is thinking about your wellbeing toolkit. Now this is a very busy slide, and there are a lot of things on here. And not only are there a lot of things on here, but they're also very broad. And what I would like you to do, if you can't see them very clearly because of the size of your screen, is to take some time, using this as an example if helpful, to think about the things that you can do to look after your well-being. So if we even take just one of these for an example, be in nature. Well, what might that look like for you? If you know your mental health benefits from being outdoors, how can you try and get that into your day? Are you able to do trips like go to the coast? But even smaller things such as sitting outside in your garden, going to a local park, accessing a woodland if you can. How can you be in nature little and often? And when you're there, slow down. Take in the smells, the sights, the feeling of the damp grass, but really be in nature and allow that to nurture you. I've written breath and breathe on here, but again, if you find that slow breathing that we did earlier in through your nose and out through your mouth helpful, how can you start using breath work? So before I started this talk today, I took a few moments to breathe, to think about my intention of what I wanted to bring to the session, to focus on what I wanted to say, and that helped calm me and reduce my anxiety, and I think helped me focus on what I wanted the talk to be about. So use breath work little and often. But use any of these examples here, and like you might be prescribed citalopram, 20 milligrams a day for depression, you almost want to have a well-being prescription that you write for yourself, that on that prescription contains lots of things that are good for your well-being. And treat it like you would a medical prescription, where you know that what is good for you is to get outside, to move your body, to breathe slowly, to connect with others. If you know those things are important to your mental health, then prioritize them. Try and build them into your routine. If you require the support of others in order to make that happen, then do so. Have conversations with loved ones saying, I need to take more time for myself. And what I'm going to do with that time is that after tea every evening, I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. And then I'm going to come back for the evening. Whatever your things happen to be, try and build them in and do them regularly. So what I'd like you to do now is, based on what we've been doing today, about the capacity cup, about well-being, about noticing our feelings, today I will commit to, what thing can you commit to doing today that will help your well-being? So for me, it's sunny now, so I'm going to commit to eating my lunch outside in my garden before I have to go and collect my daughter from school, because I like the outdoors and it will help me to calm down after giving this talk today. So that's what I'm going to commit to. When I've finished here, I'm going to go and have lunch outside, and then I'm going to join the mindfulness session. And again, the power of writing, I'd invite you now to put pen to paper and write one commitment to yourself that will nurture you. And enjoy it. whatever you choose. So I know we've been focusing today on kind of practical tips, well-being. Just to summarize really the talk today, my tips are: get to know your capacity cup, get to know your internal emotional state, what's filling that cup up and how you can bring it down. If you notice yourself going into that top red area, catch it early and do what you can to bring that capacity down. Learn to notice, name, and nurture your feelings. They vary throughout every single day. Some are nicer than others. Notice them all. Be in touch with them all. Name what's going on, and then try and respond in a positive way to them. Use your well-being kit like a prescription, but make sure that you are prioritizing those little things throughout the day that will help you feel better. Schedule small, nice activities every day. And connect with others. We don't need to have many friends in life. We just need a few people or partners who we can be open with, who we can talk to. And if we're not used to having emotional conversations with them, the power of doing so is so great that I would recommend you start being bold and having those conversations with people for your well-being and theirs. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found the session today helpful, interesting, thought-provoking, and there's lots more resources out there through the Psychology Mum or elsewhere if you do want to look into these strategies a bit more. Thank you.
Sarah, thank you so much. That was lovely.